Dawn rose slowly over Lamar Carter's ranch, as if the sun itself was uncertain about touching a place held together by silence and worn wood. Light spilled across the dry earth in long, trembling ribbons, catching on the porch boards where a young woman stood barefoot, her thin apron fluttering around her like a nervous whisper. Elisa Keller, 24 years old and carrying the kind of loneliness that made even sunlight feel heavy, held a chipped tin cup against her chest. Steam drifted up from the weak coffee she brewed before the roosters stirred, drifting past her tired face like a prayer not yet answered. She had been living here for 3 weeks, though nothing in the house suggested her presence. She drifted through the rooms like a feather a breeze forgot to lift, quiet, careful, never wanting to be a burden. Her sister's sickness had left someone needed in Lamar's kitchen, and Elisa had stepped in. There was no other choice. Her sister was bedridden at her in-laws' home, and Elisa had no home at all. She had come here with one dress, one apron, and the stubborn belief that working hard enough could make a person invisible. Inside the house, the floorboards thumped. Lamar was awake. Elisa stiffened, setting down the cup as if it might shatter the moment he saw it out of place. She smoothed her hair with shaking fingers and slipped into the kitchen, where the morning stove glowed like a small red eye. She stirred the pot of beans she had left soaking overnight, her movements precise, rehearsed, meant to be unnoticeable. The door pushed open behind her. She didn't look up. Bootsteps. Heavy, irritated. They always sounded irritated. Lamar Carter filled the doorway the way a storm filled the skyline. Broad-shouldered, sun-browned, a jaw set hard like it had forgotten how to relax. 34 years of dust, loss and work clung to him, and Elisa felt all of it when he entered a room. He wasn't cruel. Just carved from a life that had given more blows than blessings. His voice came low and rough. Coffee's burned again. Elisa flinched though she'd tasted it moments ago, and knew it hadn't burned. But she nodded anyway. I'll make another pot. Lamar rubbed his forehead, already frustrated with himself for snapping, but too proud to take it back. He stepped toward the stove, grabbed a tin cup, and exhaled sharply when he realized her hands were trembling. You don't need to jump like that every time I speak, he muttered. She kept stirring. I'm sorry, sir. He stared at her for a slow, unreadable moment, then walked out, boots echoing through the hall. Elisa let her breath out so softly, it didn't belong to the air at all. She wasn't afraid of him, not exactly. But men like Lamar had sharp edges even when they didn't use them. She had learned young how to move around sharpness without bleeding. By mid-morning, the ranch buzzed with life. Ranch hands drifted in and out, boots muddy, shirts damp with sweat. Elisa moved through it like a ghost tending small miracles. Fresh biscuits, clean linens, boiled water, patched shirts. She'd begun mending Lamar's clothes because his cuffs were always torn. She never asked permission. She simply sewed the hems tight again and folded the shirts on the table. Today, as she folded one of them, Lamar appeared in the doorway again. He watched her for a heartbeat too long, though she didn't see it. Something crossed his face, something softer than anger, something like recognition, but he buried it beneath his usual bluntness. You don't need to do all that. Her fingers tightened on the cloth. It's my job, sir. He paused. It was your sister's job. The words stabbed deeper than he knew. Her throat tightened. She bent her head, trying to hide the way emotion flickered in her eyes. I'm just meant to fill in until she gets well enough, Elisa murmured. Nothing more. But Lamar didn't respond. He looked at the freshly folded shirt, then at her hands, small, tired, determined, and something uneasy stirred inside him. Before he could name it, he turned away and walked out into the sunlight. By afternoon, the sky shimmered with heat. Elisa fetched water from the well, her shadow stretching thin behind her. Old Martha Briggs, the neighboring widow who visited once a week, called from her wagon. Child, you're working yourself into the ground. Elisa forced a gentle smile. I'm grateful to have work at all. Martha's eyes narrowed, wise and kind. That man isn't half as hard as he tries to look. Don't let his quiet scare you. Elisa didn't answer. She didn't know what scared her more, Lamar's silence or the small part of her that wished he saw her at all. As the afternoon slid toward evening, Elisa cleaned the stove, wiped the long wooden table, and swept the floor until the boards shone like honey under the fading light. She liked making things feel cared for. It helped her forget how long it had been since someone cared for her. The ranch hands drifted in for supper. Elisa stood behind the stove, ladling food into plates while they laughed and talked. Lamar entered last, rubbing the back of his neck, as if holding himself together by habit alone. When he sat, the room quieted slightly. His presence always brought a strange hush. He tasted her stew. Better. A single word. Rough. Simple. But Elisa's chest warmed as if he'd handed her something precious. Night settled heavy in gold. The men dispersed. Elisa scrubbed the pots while the crickets sang outside the open window. The scent of stew lingered. A soft wind stirred her hair. She felt the house breathe with her for the first time since she arrived. Then she heard it. Lamar's voice, drifting from the porch, low and unfiltered. "Ain't planning on keeping anyone living under my roof forever." Her hands froze in the washwater. He wasn't speaking to her, only talking to a ranch hand, tired and careless with the words he chose. But to Elisa, the sentence cracked like lightning. She stepped back from the sink, heart collapsing quietly inside her chest. She swallowed hard, wiped her hands on her apron, and stood alone in the dim kitchen as the night deepened around her. She had believed she was invisible. Now she feared she truly was. Morning light crept over the ranch like a shy visitor, brushing gold across the windowsill where Elisa stood kneading dough. Her palms moved slowly, methodically, the rhythm steady even as her thoughts trembled beneath her calm exterior. The words she overheard last night, Lamar's careless declaration that he wasn't planning on keeping anyone under his roof, echoed in her ribs like a loose board clattering in the wind. She tried to bury the sting beneath work, but it clung to her like dust that wouldn't wash away. When the dough was set to rise, she swept the kitchen, wiped every surface twice, then set out the coffee. She moved quietly, but not the same kind of quiet as before. Before, she had been invisible by choice. Now she was invisible because she feared being seen too clearly. Bootsteps approached. Elisa tensed. Lamar entered, hair still damp from washing at the pump outside, shirt half-buttoned, temper half-awake. He reached for the pot and poured a cup, glancing toward her with a faint crease between his brows. Something unsaid flickered in his eyes, an apology he didn't know how to speak. "The coffee's fine today," he muttered, almost grudgingly. She nodded without lifting her gaze. "Thank you, sir." Her voice was sanded down to its smoothest edge, polite but distant. Lamar frowned, sensing the shift, sensing her retreat from him, even though she was standing 3 feet away. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then drank quietly. He wasn't a man built for fixing delicate things. He had no idea how to repair a silence that felt like it was turning into a wall. The ranch hands drifted in for breakfast. Elisa served with her usual grace, but there was a hollowness to her posture, a dimming of the soft spark she carried when she first arrived. Lamar noticed. Every time she slid a plate in front of someone without looking up, something in him tightened. After breakfast, Elisa stepped outside to hang laundry. The sun warmed her shoulders, but inside she felt cold, like the world had shrunk to the size of her shadow in the dirt. She lifted a clean shirt, one of Lamar's she had stitched, and clipped it to the line. The breeze caught it, making it sway like a ghost dancing on a string. From behind her came a cheerful voice. "Mornin', Miss Elisa." Jeb Crowley, just 19 and always smiling, approached with a small wooden crate of eggs. He set it down beside her, brushing dust from his pants. His grin was as open as a summer sky. "You make this place smell like home, you know that?" he said lightly. She blushed faintly, shaking her head. "I just do my work." "Well, you do it better than anyone. Lamar's lucky to have you here." The compliment struck more sharply than Jeb intended. Elisa gave a weak smile, thanked him, and turned back to the laundry. But Jeb wasn't blind. He saw the sadness she tried to tuck behind her lashes. "If you ever need help with anything," he added gently, "I'm right around." Lamar watched them from the barn doorway, jaw tightening. He couldn't hear the words, but he saw the soft way Jeb spoke, the shy tilt of Elisa's head, and something sharp twisted in his chest. He told himself it was just ranch business, Jeb distracting her from chores, but even he didn't believe the lie. Later, Elisa returned to the kitchen to prepare supper. The heat from the stove flushed her cheeks as she stirred a pot of stew, head bent, breath shallow. She was pushing herself again, working longer, faster, harder, like she needed to prove she wasn't a weight on anyone's shoulders. Lamar stepped into the doorway, arms folded. He hadn't spoken since Jeb's cheerful exchange outside, and the silence between them felt stretched thin, fragile as brittle glass. "You don't have to cook enough for an army," he said finally. She kept stirring. "It's what your men need." He hesitated, then added more softly, "It's what you need too, rest." Her grip tightened on the spoon. "I'm fine, sir." Her tone was thin, controlled. Lamar felt his temper tug at its leash, not angry at her, but at something breaking between them. Something he didn't know how to fix. He stepped into the room. "Elisa, you've been off lately." She forced a steady breath. "Just tired, that's all." He studied her face. Shadows under her eyes. Shoulders drawn close like a frightened bird. Something inside him shifted uncomfortably. Then came the accident. While slicing vegetables, Elisa's hand slipped. The knife nicked her finger and she gasped, blood dotting the cutting board. Lamar crossed the room faster than he meant to, catching her wrist gently. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," she whispered. He ignored her protest, pulling a clean cloth and wrapping her finger with surprising tenderness for a man known for his hard edges. She stared at his hands, steady, warm, careful, and her heartbeat stumbled. "You're working yourself too hard," he murmured, eyes darkening with concern he didn't know how to voice clearly. Her voice cracked. "I don't want to be a burden." Lamar froze, confusion washing over him. "A burden?" Elisa pulled her hand back, suddenly flustered. I know I'm only here until my sister recovers. I don't want to trouble anyone. I don't want to overstay." Her voice faded like smoke. Lamar's brows drew tight. That word again, overstay. The same fear she carried on her first day. The same fear that built walls around her. Before he could speak, a distant shout called him outside. He stepped back reluctantly, glancing at her with a troubled expression. "We'll talk later." The door swung shut behind him. Elisa leaned against the counter, breathing unsteadily. She wrapped her own arms around herself, as if trying to hold the pieces together. The stew simmered softly, the kitchen glowing in the golden hush of late afternoon. She felt small inside it, like she was shrinking despite how hard she worked to fill the spaces around her. Outside, Lamar's voice rose, brief, agitated, then faded into the distance. He didn't return until the sun dipped low, painting the sky in aching shades of red and amber. Elisa served supper quietly, avoiding his eyes. Lamar watched her more than he ate. When the men finally left the table, Elisa began washing dishes. The light faded to a deep indigo. The house took on its night breath. Lamar stepped into the kitchen doorway once more, hands at his sides, jaw set in that way that meant he was wrestling something serious. "Elisa." She looked up, startled by the firmness in his tone. "We're not done talking." Her breath caught. But before he could say another word, a distant thud shook the front porch, the sound of something falling hard in the dark. They both froze. The night, suddenly, felt full of secrets. The sound on the porch thudded through the house like a warning knocking on bone. Elisa's breath hitched as she set the dish rag down, her fingers trembling just enough to betray her calm. Lamar stepped forward first, instinct tightening every line of his shoulders. He wasn't the kind of man who feared much, but nightfall in the open plains had a way of stirring old memories. Ones he didn't speak about, even when the fire crackled low. Elisa followed him to the door, keeping a careful distance. Her heart beat in soft, frightened wings against her ribs. Lamar pushed the door open with the slow caution of a man used to expecting trouble. Instead of danger, the lantern revealed a toppled wooden crate and a stray old horse brushing its nose along the boards, searching for grain. Lamar blew out a breath, not quite a laugh but close. The tension in the doorway loosened, though not entirely. Something else lingered there between them, something neither of them had put words to. He walked the horse back toward the gate, muttering under his breath about careless ranch hands. Elisa watched him from the porch steps, her hands clasped tight in front of her apron. The moonlight spilled around him, turning his shoulders silver and his face unreadable. He glanced back once and caught her watching. For a strange, charged moment, neither looked away. Then he nodded toward the open door. "You should go inside. It'll get cold." She obeyed, though warmth wasn't the thing she was missing. When Lamar returned, he wiped dust from his palms and stepped into the kitchen, where the single lantern cast its soft halo across her features. She avoided his gaze, her earlier courage dissolving. He noticed, of course he did. "Elisa, earlier. About you being a burden." Her throat closed, and she stepped back as if the words themselves might push her too close. "I shouldn't have said anything," she whispered. "It wasn't my place." Lamar frowned. He was not a man comfortable with misunderstandings. Especially not with one that left her eyes dim and guarded. "You're twisting something that wasn't meant for you, Elisa. I wasn't talking about." She cut him off gently. "It doesn't matter, sir. I know my situation." Her voice had the quiet certainty of someone who rarely allowed herself hope. Lamar's jaw tightened. He looked at her like she was a puzzle with pieces missing. Pieces he wanted to understand, but didn't know how to touch without breaking them. He stepped forward. "It matters." The air thickened. Elisa's breath trembled. For one suspended moment, it felt like the world was leaning in to listen. Wind pausing outside, lantern flame flickering still. Then the front door creaked open and Jeb Crowley poked his head inside, hat in his hands. "Evenin', Mr. Carter." "Miss Elisa." His bright voice shattered the fragile silence between them. Elisa stepped back instantly, putting distance between herself and Lamar. Lamar stiffened, irritation flickering in his eyes. Not at Jeb, but at the moment interrupted. Jeb approached with a small basket from Martha Briggs. "Ma says to make sure Miss Elisa don't skip supper herself. She said you looked pale today." Elisa's cheeks warmed, and she thanked him softly. Jeb's gaze lingered with innocent fondness, unaware of the storm quietly forming behind Lamar's eyes. When he finally left, the house sank into quiet once more. Lamar exhaled sharply, rubbing the back of his neck. "You should sit. You look worn out." "I'm fine." "You're not." His tone wasn't sharp, just honest, weighted with the concern he didn't know how to disguise. Elisa hesitated, then sank into a chair, keeping her posture small and contained. Lamar stood across from her, studying her hands, delicate, chapped from work, folded tightly in her lap. "Why do you think you're not wanted here?" he asked. She flinched. "Sir, please don't. Tell me." The words were too gentle to refuse. Her eyes glimmered with unshed emotion as she finally spoke. "Because I've never stayed anywhere long enough to matter." The confession fell like soft, painful rain. Lamar's expression shifted, anger melting into something far heavier, something that made his breath come rougher. He stepped closer, slow and unsure, as if approaching a wild creature that might bolt. "You matter here more than you think." Her lips parted, fragile hope flickering. But before either could say more, the lantern flickered suddenly, casting the room into wavering shadows. A gust of wind rattled the shutters. The night outside hummed with a strange, restless energy. Lamar moved toward the window, scanning the yard. "Storm's rolling in," he muttered. Elisa wrapped her arms around herself, the house creaking in agreement. She had lived through storms before, storms of weather, storms of people, storms inside her own heart, but this one felt different. It pressed against the walls like it carried messages. When Lamar returned to her side, the closeness felt dangerous in a way neither ran from. "You're safe here, Elisa," he said quietly. She met his gaze, something shifting between them like a slow, trembling dawn. "Thank you," she whispered. But her eyes said she didn't believe she deserved it. Thunder murmured in the distance, a low promise. The lantern dimmed, flared, then steadied. The air smelled of rain and the first hint of something warmer. Something rising between two lonely souls who had not yet learned how to reach for each other. Lamar opened his mouth to say something more, something real, but the storm broke suddenly in a flash of lightning, slamming the darkness against the windows. Elisa jumped. Lamar stepped closer. And for the first time, their shadows touched on the floor. Lightning forked across the sky, spilling white fire through the windows before the darkness swallowed it back. The house shuddered under a sudden gust, and Elisa stood frozen where she was, the storm echoing the trembling inside her chest. Lamar reached past her to steady the lantern, but the brief closeness sent a quiet shock through them both. Too near, too unguarded, the air trembling with things neither knew how to say. She stepped back first, her breath unsteady. "I should finish cleaning the dishes," she murmured. Lamar shook his head, voice low. "Leave them. Storm's just getting started. No sense tiring yourself more." His gentleness caught her off guard. She lowered her gaze, unsure how to hold it without breaking. A loud crack split the sky. The shutters banged wildly. Elisa winced, hands rising instinctively to her ears. Lamar noticed and moved closer, slow, careful, like he was approaching something delicate he didn't want to startle. "You all right?" She nodded, though fear shimmered in her eyes. Storms had always unnerved her. Years of drifting through houses had taught her too well. Storms made people restless, made tempers short, made homes feel smaller. Lamar scanned her face, reading what she tried to hide. Without thinking, he reached out and gently guided her toward the living room, where the stone hearth glowed with a hesitant fire. "Sit. I'll add more wood." Elisa obeyed because it was easier than arguing, and because exhaustion weighed her limbs like wet cloth. She wrapped her arms around herself, and watched the flames stretch tall as Lamar fed the fire. Shadows danced along the walls, softening the harsh lines of his posture. When he finally settled on the opposite chair, silence pooled between them. Not empty, just full of unspoken truths. Elisa broke first. "I'm sorry if I make things harder here." Lamar stared at her, stunned. "Harder?" Her voice faltered. "I know I'm only meant to help until my sister recovers. I know I shouldn't get used to being here." Her eyes shimmered. Fear. Shame. The certainty of someone who never had a place solid enough to trust. Lamar leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice roughened by something more honest than anger. "Elisa, you walk through this house like you're apologizing for breathing. That's what makes it harder." She swallowed, confused. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not." But the words didn't convince her. She had spent too many years believing the opposite. Another thunderclap boomed across the plains. Elisa flinched. Lamar rose, crossed the small space, and knelt beside her chair. Not demanding. Not imposing. Just there. "Look at me," he said softly. She hesitated, then lifted her gaze. Her eyes glistened like rain caught in lantern light. "You're the reason this place feels like a home again." Her breath broke, trembling like a cracked note. "No one's ever said something like that to me." Lamar's jaw clenched, not in anger but in regret for every moment she had lived without tenderness. "You deserve to hear it. And more." Before she could respond, a fierce gust rattled the door. The storm pressed against the walls as if demanding entry. The sudden noise made Elisa flinch again, and this time Lamar reacted without thinking. His hand reached for hers, steady and warm. Her fingers curled instinctively into his, small and cold in his rough palm. She didn't pull away. She didn't breathe at all. They stayed like that for several moments, the storm howling outside while something quieter, deeper, shifted inside the room. Gradually, her trembling eased. "Thank you," she whispered. He didn't let go. "You shouldn't face storms alone." Something fragile unfurled inside her at those words. Something she didn't have a name for yet. She leaned her weight slightly toward him, not touching, but closer than she had ever allowed before. The fire crackled. Rain hammered the roof. The world outside was chaos, but inside the small living room, a strange peace grew between them, warm, cautious, tender. After a while, Elisa's eyes fluttered, weariness washing over her. She hadn't slept well in weeks, not since worry became her nightly companion. Her head dipped slightly, as if fighting the heaviness. "Go on," Lamar murmured. "Rest if you need to." "I'm fine," she protested softly. He shook his head. "You're falling asleep where you sit." Her cheeks warmed, embarrassed, but the exhaustion was too deep to hide. When she swayed again, Lamar stood and gently placed a folded blanket over her shoulders, the gesture quiet and reverent. Elisa blinked up at him, breath catching at the softness in his eyes, something she had never expected to see aimed at her. "You take care of everyone here," he said. "Let someone take care of you for once." That sentence unlocked something inside her chest. Something she'd kept locked for years. She hesitated, then let her head rest lightly against the back of the chair, her eyelids drooping. Lamar stepped back, watching her in the glow of the fire. She looked small, fragile in sleep, yet there was a strength inside her that pulled at him in ways he didn't understand. The storm outside raged harder, but inside the room everything felt strangely still. Elisa's breathing softened. Her hand, still resting on the arm of the chair, relaxed open. Lamar watched her for a long moment, a question rising in his chest, one he wasn't ready to voice. He reached out, just for a second, brushing a stray strand of hair away from her face. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "You matter more here than you know." Thunder rolled once more, softer this time, as if the storm itself was listening. Lamar stepped away, but not far. Because for the first time, he wasn't sure he wanted the night to end. Morning crept into the house like a shy guest, brushing pale gold across the hearthstones and warming the blanket around Elisa's shoulders. She stirred slowly, the memory of last night's storm drifting through her like a half-remembered dream. Lamar had stayed beside her as she slept by the fire. His quiet kindness still pulsed warm in her chest. She rose and touched the folded blanket, so carefully placed it almost hurt. No one had ever tucked warmth around her before. Not like that. The house was too quiet for morning. When she stepped outside, she found Lamar by the corral, running a calming hand over a restless mare. His shoulders carried the weight of something unsaid. When he turned at her footsteps, the early light made him look almost softened, almost vulnerable. "You slept by the fire," she whispered. "You needed rest," he replied. "I wasn't about to go far." Those words wrapped gently around her. She twisted her fingers in her apron. "I'm sorry if I caused trouble last night." Lamar stepped closer, his voice steady. "You didn't cause trouble. Not once. You've done nothing but hold this place together." She looked up, startled by the warmth in his eyes. Something shifted around them, like the ranch itself held its breath. "Elisa! I need to say something." Her breath trembled. He exhaled, as if releasing years of loneliness. "I've been a fool," he said. "You walk through my home quiet as a prayer, and I pretended not to notice what you bring to it. I kept telling myself you were just passing through, because I didn't know how to hold something good without breaking it." "You're not someone who breaks things," she murmured. His voice softened. "I've broken myself more than I admit. But you make this place breathe again. You make me breathe again." Her fingers shook. Lamar reached out and held her hand like something holy. "I don't want you to leave when your sister recovers. I don't want this house going empty again." Her voice cracked. "What do you want?" The question trembled with all the fear she'd lived with. Lamar's reply came rough with truth. "I want you to stay because... Elisa, I love you." The world seemed to fall silent around them. "I've loved you in every quiet room you walked into," he whispered. "I just didn't know how to say it." Tears warmed her cheeks. She stepped into him, breath shaking. "I love you too. I just never thought anyone would want me." His arms wrapped around her, steady as shelter. "You're wanted. You're needed. You're home." By afternoon, under the wide sky and Martha Briggs' soft prayers, they married beside the barn. Elisa wore a simple ribbon. Lamar held her hand like a vow he'd keep forever. When he kissed her, slow, steady, the ranch hands cheered, and Elisa felt the world settle into place. Later, as the sun dipped low, Lamar touched his forehead to hers. "We'll figure every step together." Her smile trembled with joy. And the world whispered back, "This is only the beginning."